a Blumhouse Productions horror film where a monster on a deserted island is hunting teenagers. Sounds pretty awesome, right? Let's find out in episode 1 of my Halloween Shocktoberfest. So Prey is a 2019 horror film directed by Frank Calhoun. It stars Logan Miller, Christine Froseth, and Gillian Anderson. Now back in the day when companies released movies straight to DVD or to streaming services, you automatically assume that they were going to be pretty crappy. But that's not really the case these days because theaters don't have time for and aren't really interested in anything but the big budget tentpole films like, the Avengers. Because of that, a lot of companies can't get their movies distributed to these theaters, so they're putting their movies out straight to DVD, video on demand, and streaming services. And nowhere has the release of movies straight to DVD been more prolific than the genre of horror. But nowadays, when a noteworthy horror movie gets put straight to DVD or on video on demand or on streaming services, gorehounds like myself get pretty excited for it. It's the film equivalent of a hot underground street rapper dropping their newest mixtape. And Prey is one of those movies. A lot of times here in Doha, we're getting to watch those movies that you guys aren't seeing in the States because they do get released in theaters over here. So when I saw that a Blumhouse horror production was coming to Qatar, I got pretty excited. I went in optimistic and without any expectations because I did not watch a trailer because trailers tend to ruin everything. And as always, my review is going to be spoiler free, so no worries there. All that being said, let's get into it and break down Prey using my patented Halloween Spooktacular 5S rating system. The 5 S's are story, cinematography, sound, spookiness, and scares. Yes, I know cinematography is spelled with a C, but not during the month of October. So first up is story. So I really like the premise of a troubled kid who has a family tragedy and then enrolls into a program where they take at-risk youth, teach them survival skills, and then they put them on a deserted island where they have to not only survive, but discover who they are as a person. While the premise is pretty unique and kind of awesome, they really botched the execution. You briefly see our protagonist Toby interact with his family, some stuff happens, he talks to a couple people in really brief scenes, and the next thing you know, he's getting dropped off on the island. So when certain things happen, you don't really feel that connection that you would have if they had spent even another 10 to 15 minutes on that thing that happened at the beginning and on the survival program, because you never actually see what he learns in the program. And while that could work if they were, little by little revealing his knowledge as he's trying to survive on this island, it doesn't really work that way because for the first 2/3 of the film, he's kind of a moron and he makes nothing but mistake after mistake, so it's almost like this program didn't teach him anything. And if that's the case, what is the purpose of it? He starts to notice that there's something wrong on the island, he starts seeing a lot of things, especially at night, but luckily, he runs into this girl named Madeline who also happened to grow up on the island. But she is an amazing hunter, she knows everything about the island, she teaches him a lot of stuff, they spend time together, it's almost like a twisted version of Blue Lagoon. So the movie starts to pick up and get a little better from that point, but unfortunately it can't maintain that momentum. There's a decent amount of leaps in logic, especially when it comes to Toby and what he knows and how he goes from basically knowing nothing to doing a whole bunch of stuff that is kind of awesome. So you'll find yourself sitting there wondering, why didn't he do that in the first place? And obviously the reason is because it didn't fit the plot. So that's enough about the story. How does the movie look? Let's get to cinematography. The cinematography is very straightforward. It's not really stylish at all. It is meant to just, ground the picture in realism. There are quite a few wide shots where you see Toby on this island and you realize how isolated he is. So I think that's fairly effective too. There are certain scenes where you see Toby kind of talking to himself, and the way they cut it, it almost looks like he's talking to another kid that looks like him. And that actually works pretty well. It's almost like he's battling, what he knows, what he doesn't know, how to fix it, how to survive through these things. But they only do that once or twice at the very beginning and then they just drop it. While the lighting is pretty good, especially during the scenes of night, there are a lot of scenes where it's so dark you can't see anything that's going on and you're kind of just staring at the screen trying to figure it out. I did enjoy the way that they color graded the film. It starts off warm and as it goes on, it gets a little colder and a little colder. You get more and more blue in the shots as it goes. So it's almost like the sense of dread is building, and he's getting more and more involved in this island, and reality is coming to him that he's in this really bad situation and he has to do something to survive. There are a few rough edits and transitions here and there that really take you out of the movie because they're so distracting, and it's not a style thing, they're just not very well done. But in this sort of movie, the visuals aren't always the most important thing, sound design is. So let's get to sound. The musical score is completely forgettable. I don't remember any of the music whatsoever, but I did have a feeling of menace. It has these really dissonant tones, and they do help build tension and let you know that something bad is going to happen. The problem is the music almost never stops. This movie would be far better if they gave the sounds, the ambient noises, the jungle, the creatures, and if they gave more of those sounds time to breathe and for you to take it in, you would feel like you're on that island with him much more than you do. When almost every scene is accompanied by music, you feel like you're watching a movie, and of course that's what you're doing, but you don't always want to feel that way. It's almost like the director and the editors didn't trust the audience to know when something should be scary and when it should. The few times where they do cut the music or keep it at a really low level to where it's just like these low rumbling dissonant tones, you feel uncomfortable. You start to feel how claustrophobic that jungle is. So it almost feels like the director, the editors, and the sound designers didn't feel like their stuff was strong enough to stand on its own and to scare you. They don't let the sounds do their thing and add to the spookiness of the film. And that brings me to, of course, Spookiness. So when I talk about spookiness, I'm talking about the atmosphere and the mood and the world building and the stuff that gives the movie a horror feel. So anytime a horror movie takes place in the great outdoors, I get pretty excited because you know, not only is that person or group of people going to be facing off against a monster or someone who is hunting them, they also have to worry about the great outdoors. And let's face it, Mother Nature is the deadliest force on Earth. So you have double the danger and twice the atmosphere. And right away during the title sequence, you start to feel that. It's a bunch of Polaroids that show certain pictures, and it tells a story that progresses from one thing to another, and you get the feel of the jungle, of what the environment's like, and the situation that these people in the photos are dealing with, and then it stops and the movie starts. So you're very intrigued and you want to know what happened or what those pictures had to do with the film. Even the guide who's taking each of these troubled kids to their different islands because they're on a big chain in Malaysia, she doesn't seem to know what she's doing, and a bunch of stuff happens during the film to where you kind of question, is she right to be training these kids? Is she right to be the one who drops them off and picks them up? If she doesn't even know these islands, she's not familiar with their dangers, and she doesn't know what to do, because if she doesn't know, the kids definitely aren't going to know. I do like the fact that you're only given information as Toby's given information, so you feel like you are discovering things as he is. Toby finally does meet up with Madeline, the girl who's raised on this island, and that does help add menace to the film because she tells him certain things he shouldn't do, where he shouldn't go, what he should do, and she does a few things that really show him he knows nothing. You never really feel too much menace coming from this island or the situation that he is in. You don't feel a lot of danger. You just kind of feel like he's going to make it out of here alive no matter what. The only time you really feel like something bad could happen is when they make it very obvious with the music and the lighting. This film, of course, does teach an important lesson. If you're going to be a missionary, really make sure you're going to someplace safe and where you will be accepted for your work, because a lot of people, if you try to push your faith onto certain people, they're definitely going to push back in a non-peaceful manner. And that finally brings me to the most important aspect of a horror film, and that is the scares. There are a couple of jump scares in this movie. There are a few jump scares in this movie, but only one or two of them feel earned. They built up to in a certain way, and they felt like they should be there. But there are a lot of others that are pretty cheap. Something else that really takes you out of the movie is the horrible, horrible CGI in this film. Obviously, CGI is very important to a horror film if you can't afford to do really cool practical effects. And pretty much every creature effect in this movie is done using CGI. And I'm talking about that early 2000s CGI that you saw in all those really crappy Exorcist movie knockoffs where the possessed person or whatever would look and they would see somebody's face and it turns into a monster and then goes back to normal. You know, the stuff that you can put on like your Instagram stories now. That's what the stuff looks like in this movie. So every time the creature is on screen, you don't feel any danger, you don't feel a sense of menace. All you notice is the crappy CGI. The ending is so bad, it's so very, very predictable. You've seen it in a million other horror movies and you see it coming from a mile away. If they had at least stuck the ending, I think the film would do a lot better with horror hounds, but as it is, most people who love horror are gonna see it coming and they're not gonna like it.
And now the moment we've all been waiting for is here.
It's Judgment Day.
We're out of time.
Overall, this movie is a wasted opportunity to use a pretty cool premise. This movie is just filled to the brim with logic-defying decisions that are only there to progress the plot. You also have like magically appearing props that come at the right moments. There was no build up to them and you're just like, where the hell did that come from? Add to that the horrible effects, the stilted story progression, and fairly shallow characters. And of course, two key moments where things were cut for censorship, and you have a recipe for a disastrous film that only the dentist teenager is going to enjoy. And the only person that this movie is going to scare is maybe a little kid who's never seen a horror film. And that's why I unfortunately have to give Blumhouse Productions' Prey a 3 out of 10.